Colorado River basin snowpack levels are near record lows, and that has an impact on Lake Mead's water levels, which in turn can have an impact on our water bills as well.
Lake Mead has dropped more than 140 feet below its original level, exposing a shocking bathtub ring visible from space. Can a reservoir once holding 9 years of Colorado River flow really be on the brink of vanishing? More than 25 million people depend on this water, yet the crisis is far from a drought alone. Behind this staggering drop lies a century-old miscalculation, an unsustainable water supply carved from an unusually wet period, and a mega drought unmatched in over 1,000 years. What happens when the river no longer delivers enough to keep the lifeline alive? The shrinking Lake Mead. Lake Mead, once a vast reservoir holding nearly 9 years' worth of Colorado River flow, now sits at just over a quarter of its capacity. The water level has dropped by more than 140 feet below its designed full pool height, an alarming decline that has stunned engineers and water managers alike. In July 2022, the lake's surface fell to roughly 1,040 feet above sea level, the lowest since it was first filled during the 1930s. This sharp drop brought the reservoir frighteningly close to what experts call dead pool, the critical threshold around 895 feet, where water can no longer pass through Hoover Dam by gravity alone. Beyond this point, no hydroelectric power can be generated, and water deliveries to millions would halt. Despite some recent rises in water levels due to good snowpack years in the Rocky Mountains, the crisis is far from over. The lake's temporary recovery to around 1,070 to 1,080 feet provides little relief when compared to the historical full pool of 1,221 feet. This means Lake Mead still remains about 140 feet below where it should be to function normally. The reservoir's shrinking volume threatens not just water supply, but also the massive infrastructure designed around it, particularly Hoover Dam. The dam relies on water pressure to generate electricity and maintain stable water delivery to cities like Las Vegas and Phoenix. Without sufficient lake levels, Hoover Dam's ability to fulfill this role falters. Governments and scientists recognize the severity of this drop, but the cause matters as much as the effect. What many see as a straightforward drought crisis is actually part of a far more complex issue involving historical water management choices and long-term climate patterns. The water level decline is not just a temporary hiccup waiting for rain to return. It signals deeper structural challenges in the Colorado River system. Meanwhile, the invisible but critical math behind the lake levels is worsening each year, making the situation increasingly dire. The question weighing heavily on engineers is how much longer Hoover Dam and the 25 million people it serves can endure under these conditions. The public often judges water crises by how the surface looks, but the real story lies beneath. As the lake's surface drops, it exposes more than dry land. It signals failing infrastructure, energy loss, and risk to communities reliant on the river water. The decline sets off cascading problems, from power shortages to disruptions in urban water supply. Hoover Dam stands as both a symbol of progress and a warning sign for what happens when natural systems are pushed beyond their limits. The shrinking lake is a quiet emergency with enormous implications for the entire Southwest. The scale of this water loss also creates logistical nightmares. Cities, farms, and natural ecosystems that have thrived on Colorado River water for decades face uncertainty and urgent calls to adapt. As Lake Mead recedes, it reveals physical evidence of the crisis, a chilling preview of what continued decline could look like. This ongoing drop forces engineers and policymakers to confront tough decisions about water use, conservation, and infrastructure investments. The shrinking reservoir has become a physical and symbolic measure of risk for millions across several states. Many people might not realize how critical the 895-foot dead pool level is, but reaching it would represent an unprecedented state of emergency. Below that point, Hoover Dam's turbines could barely operate, if at all. Without hydroelectric power from the dam, electricity for parts of Nevada, Arizona, and California would be severely compromised. Water deliveries for cities and farms would be in jeopardy, triggering economic and social impacts far beyond the Southwest. The looming threat of deadpool hangs like a shadow over every drop of water users depend on. Yet, the shrinking lake is more than just a technical problem. It's a reflection of a century's worth of assumptions, decisions, and natural changes colliding in a precarious moment. Transitioning from Lake Mead's startling present condition, we find the landscape itself telling a story of water lost over decades in the form of a haunting white rim along canyon walls. The bathtub ring's warning. If you drive out of Las Vegas and look down into Black Canyon today, the first thing that catches your eye is a huge white line tracing the entire length of Lake Mead's exposed canyon. This bathtub ring, a mineral deposit residue left by thousands of acres of receding water, tells a silent but powerful story. It rises higher than a 10-story building and stretches miles across the canyon walls, visible even from space. This stark white scar is likely one of the most striking marks left anywhere on Earth by a prolonged water crisis. This ring has been growing steadily for more than 20 years, a testament to the long-term trend of decline rather than a passing drought event. Its steady rise shows that the lake is no longer filling to previous levels, leaving behind mineral stains that accumulate as water recedes. Unlike temporary dry spells, this feature reflects lasting changes in water volume and availability. The bathtub ring offers a visual reminder of what reliable water sources once looked like, now replaced by exposed rock and mineral crust. The whiteness of the ring comes from minerals once dissolved in the lake, but now concentrated as the water evaporates. This mineral line is not just an aesthetic curiosity. It's a signpost marking the boundary between past abundance and current scarcity. The story it tells is one of balance lost and promises broken across natural and political systems. It carries the silent weight of millions more thirsty mouths and croplands downstream. Despite 2 recent winters of decent snowpack that boosted lake levels temporarily, the bathtub ring remains far above the current water line. That small rebound barely covers a fraction of the total loss, underscoring how far below full pool the lake now rests. This visual evidence contrasts sharply against the hopeful headlines that celebrate short-term increases. The ring makes clear that the lake's decline is more a long-term trend than a simple seasonal upswing. Residents of Las Vegas can observe the ring from multiple locations along the Strip during clear weather conditions. The sharp boundary line causes deep emotional distress to water-dependent communities because it results in complete water loss. The ring serves as an unending proof that people experience the ongoing crisis through their daily activities. The permanent water extraction mark maintains its position as an enduring landscape feature which shows human consumption of system water resources throughout multiple decades. The bathtub ring exists beyond its symbolic meaning because it brings actual operational obstacles. The process results in water quality deterioration because minerals build up when water volumes decrease. The reservoir capacity shrinkage leads to diminished safety margins, which affect both water delivery operations and power generation activities. The lake area reduction forces infrastructure systems to change because existing systems will fail without proper adjustments. The ring stands as a new shoreline drawn in chalk, a reminder of how much water has disappeared. The mineral line development demonstrates how human activities and climate conditions interact to create their effects. The lake water levels decrease because incoming water flows decrease, while existing water usage continues or increases. The ring's presence thus connects environmental changes with decades of water policy and consumption decisions. The human impacts, together with natural forces, create changes which transform both the ground and human existence throughout the Southwest region. The Colorado River Compact created the foundation for today's crisis, and dissecting its origins reveals the deep roots of the problem. The Colorado River Compact flaw. In November 1922, leaders from 7 western states gathered in Santa Fe, New Mexico, to divide up the Colorado River's water for the first time. Arizona, California, Colorado, Nevada, New Mexico, Utah, and Wyoming agreed on a legal framework now known as the Colorado River Compact. At the heart of the agreement was a simple idea: split the river's water supply roughly equally between the upper and lower basin states. The deal promised 7.5 million acre-feet of water per year to each basin, with an additional 1.5 million acre-feet contractually allocated to Mexico. On paper, it seemed a fair and practical solution for managing a vital but limited resource. The negotiation was led by Herbert Hoover, then Secretary of Commerce, and years before he would become president. Hoover's role highlighted the national importance and optimism behind taming the Colorado River for development and growth. The compact laid the groundwork for irrigation, urban development, and dam construction, most notably Hoover Dam itself, which would come a decade later. It became a cornerstone for the prosperity of the American Southwest. However, the compact's foundational mistake was a flawed assumption about the river's average flow. The water volumes were calculated using streamflow data from an unusually wet period in the late 1800s and early 1900s, some of the highest flows recorded in centuries. This brief wet stretch gave an inflated view of how much water the Colorado River could reliably provide. Unknown to the negotiators, they were setting allocations that exceeded the river's true long-term capacity. Modern scientific analysis, including tree ring data going back over 1,000 years, shows that the river's natural average flow is closer to 12 to 13 million acre-feet annually. Some years fall well below 10 million. By contrast, the compact assigned 16.5 million acre-feet per year to the United States alone, not including Mexico's share. This meant the agreement promised about 25 to 30% more water than the river has ever sustainably carried. The gap created an overpromise that no amount of conservation or infrastructure could fully close. Remarkably, some scientists and observers at the time did question the accuracy of the flow data. They warned that the unusually wet conditions might not be typical or permanent. Despite these early doubts, political momentum pushed the compact forward. After decades of state rivalry and failed attempts to share the river fairly, leaders were eager to finalize the deal and make it work. Unwilling to risk reopening negotiations with lower allocations, the compact was signed and celebrated as a triumph, even though it was founded on shaky data. This error didn't produce immediate disaster because two large reservoirs, Lake Mead and Lake Powell, stored significant amounts of water, building up a buffer zone like a savings account. As long as there was enough water in these lakes, shortfalls could be covered, providing a cushion against the ongoing overuse of the river. The reservoirs allowed the western states to live beyond their means for decades, drawing on stored water to meet growing demand. The white rim around Lake Mead was not carved by time alone. It is the visible scar of history's miscalculations colliding with nature's harshest realities. The mega drought factor. Layered on top of the century-old over-allocation is a mega drought that has gripped the Colorado River Basin for more than 2 decades. This drought is not just any dry spell. It's the worst the region has experienced in at least 1,200 years. Researchers, using tree ring data that stretches back over a millennium, have identified this ongoing dry period as unprecedented in both its length and severity. This ancient-scale drought has dramatically reduced the amount of water flowing into Lake Mead and its sister reservoir, Lake Powell. Unlike typical droughts that ebb and flow over a few years or seasons, this one has persistently depleted snowpack levels and river inflows year after year. The southwestern United States is facing a long-term climate reality marked by warmer temperatures and shifting precipitation patterns. Even when snow falls, warmer springs cause early melts, leading to less water actually reaching the reservoirs. This means that even good snow years cannot fully reverse the shrinking water supply. Despite some recent boosts from heavy snowpacks in the Sierra Nevada and Rocky Mountains during the winter of 2022 to 2023, the gains are temporary. Lake Mead rose about 30 to 40 feet from its 2022 low, sparking hopeful headlines and social media chatter. But this increase is more of a brief pause than a genuine recovery. The lake remains roughly 140 feet below full capacity, and the fundamental gap between water demand and supply persists. The drought functions as an unnoticeable force which decreases the essential water flow that naturally exists within the Colorado River system. Picture a bank account, which normally receives $12,000 annually, but now experiences a financial crisis because it must pay out $16,000 in expenses. The account will continue to experience financial losses despite the one-time $3,000 bonus, which will not provide any financial stability. The process of asset depletion moves at a gradual pace, but continues at a permanent rate, which brings the reservoirs nearer to their critical water levels during each successive dry year. The mega-drought creates additional difficulties for both urban areas and agricultural areas. The reduction of water deliveries results in mandatory conservation rules, which cause farmers to experience substantial crop damage. The remote communities and indigenous tribes experience significant effects from these cuts because they usually experience water shortages before urban centers do. The drought functions as a noose which tightens from all directions to extract every available resource from an already burdened system. The situation demonstrates that the existing crisis extends beyond mathematical errors because climate changes exacerbate the existing operational problems. Water managers encounter their most challenging decisions during the extended drought period. The essential inquiries for current operations include determining required cuts, establishing responsibility distribution, and assessing whether outdated infrastructure can manage upcoming decreases. The system relies on its massive reservoirs to function as its safety net, but these storage facilities now exist in a state of rapid shrinking, which limits all operational options during times of drought. The current drought has turned Lake Mead into a crisis indicator, which reveals the escalating severity of the emergency situation. The steady decline of the river and its reservoirs has a direct impact on Hoover Dam's ability to generate power, an issue becoming increasingly urgent as water levels fall. Hoover Dam's power crisis. Hoover Dam is far more than just a massive wall holding back water. It's one of the largest hydroelectric power plants in the western United States. When it was completed in 1935, Hoover Dam was an engineering marvel, 726 feet tall and thick enough at its base to withstand incredible pressure. Its power plant could generate roughly 280 megawatts at full capacity, enough to supply 1.3 million homes across Nevada, Arizona, and Southern California. For decades, it was a stable and cheap electricity source, powering the Southwest's rapidly growing cities. That power depends entirely on water pressure, known in engineering terms as hydraulic head. This refers to the height difference between the lake's surface and the turbines far below. The higher the water level, the more force it exerts as it falls through intake towers and giant pipes, spinning turbines to generate electricity. Losing even a few feet of water height reduces that pressure and, in turn, the plant's energy output. In recent years, as Lake Mead's level plunged, Hoover Dam's power output dropped dramatically. By the 2022 low, output had fallen between 25% and 40%. This reduction strains the regional power grid, especially in summer months when demand spikes with air conditioning use. To combat these losses, the Bureau of Reclamation installed emergency low-water turbines. These smaller turbines work under lower pressures but produce less power, effectively acting as backup units to keep generating any electricity at all. Running on these emergency turbines is far from ideal, signaling vulnerability in a system once celebrated for its robustness. The dam's diminished power capacity means more reliance on backup fossil fuel plants or expensive electricity imports, both less sustainable and costlier. As water levels continue to decline, power cuts or shortages become more likely unless effective solutions are found. Water supply itself is also threatened by dropping lake levels. The original intake pipes feeding Las Vegas's water system were designed for a lake level above 1,000 feet. As the lake nears that mark, there's a real risk the intakes could begin drawing in air instead of water, which would jeopardize the city's drinking supply. With roughly 90% of Las Vegas's water coming from Lake Mead, this is not a theoretical concern. It is a survival problem. One of the few proactive responses to this looming crisis was the construction of what's known as the third straw. This massive intake tunnel was drilled deep beneath the lake at about 860 feet elevation, well below the original intakes. Completed in 2015 at a cost of about $1.4 billion, it allowed Las Vegas to draw water from lower in the reservoir, bypassing the risk of air intake as water levels dropped. With the dam's power generation under threat, solutions and adaptations arise in some places, but the human costs and wider ramifications continue to unfold. The third straw solution. Years before Lake Mead's record lows captured national attention, one person saw the looming crisis coming. Pat Mulroy, who led the Southern Nevada Water Authority for more than 2 decades, watched the lake levels and climate data carefully. She warned repeatedly that Las Vegas was heading toward a water cliff that few wanted to confront. While some dismissed her as an alarmist, she pushed forward with a groundbreaking plan to safeguard the city's water supply. That plan became known as the Third Straw. The Third Straw is a massive intake tunnel drilled deep under Lake Mead, about 860 feet above sea level, well below the original intake pipes. Spanning nearly 3 miles through solid rock beneath the lakebed, this tunnel was engineered to provide water access even as lake levels continued to fall. Completed in 2015, after years of construction and costing nearly $1.4 billion, the Third Straw now protects Las Vegas from losing its primary water source. It literally allows the city to drink from the bottom of a shrinking glass. This ambitious project was not universally welcomed at first. Critics questioned the expense and necessity, pointing out that the lake had yet to hit the critical levels that would make the Third Straw indispensable. However, by 2022, when water levels plummeted toward historic lows and the original intakes approached failure, the Third Straw proved crucial. Without it, more than 2 million residents of Las Vegas risked having their taps run dry. The tunnel became a lifeline connecting the city to its valuable but diminishing water source. The Third Straw provides only one city with its local solution. The solution fails to solve the water shortages, which affect multiple municipalities and agricultural regions and tribal areas that spread across 7 states. Most users lack the advanced engineering and financial capabilities which Las Vegas possesses to guarantee their water supply. The declining lake and broken systems present them with urgent problems because there exist no effective methods to solve these issues. The water resilience situation in the Southwest shows uneven progress through Las Vegas, which demonstrates its ability to adapt. Urban centers with high wealth levels can spend millions to secure their water supply, while rural areas and agricultural operations must deal with restricted access or total water supply loss. The social justice issue becomes most visible through the way people respond to the water crisis, which affects different populations. The Third Straw system shows impressive features, but it demonstrates that the Colorado River crisis requires both political and social analysis together with hydrological evaluation. The project represents the beginning of a long series of future difficulties. The Third Straw system provides Las Vegas with additional water resources, but the city must still deal with its water supply limitations. The operational capacity of the system decreases because all water conservation and delivery operations depend on a smaller resource base. Regional conflicts about water distribution increase despite the city maintaining a secure environment. The unequal ripples of this crisis become clearer when we look downstream to the farmers, tribal nations, and ecosystems struggling to survive amidst shrinking flows and historic cuts. Broader human and environmental costs. As Lake Mead's levels fall, the human toll grows painfully visible. Just south of Phoenix, in Pinal County, Arizona, farming families watch their water vanish almost overnight. The Central Arizona Project Canal, a costly engineering marvel carrying Colorado River water across 336 miles of desert, once supported thriving fields of cotton, alfalfa, and grain. In 2022, as federal water shortages were declared, these farmers, with some of the lowest priority water rights, faced drastic cuts. Fields that had flourished for generations turned to cracked, barren earth almost immediately. Farmers like Will Theander describe drying out over 1,000 acres of once productive farmland. This loss is more than economic. It's a break in a lineage of stewardship and community. For families who have lived and worked the land for decades, sometimes centuries, the disappearance of water transforms not just crops, but cultures. The water rights they fought for and won in courts now feel like fragile paper promises unable to hold real water. Indigenous communities suffer similarly deep losses. The Ak-Chin Indian community in Pinal County, a tribal nation that has depended on irrigated farming for hundreds of years, saw their water share cut as well. Their fight to secure water rights through political and legal channels has been long and difficult. Watching their water disappear in a shortage they didn't cause is more than a financial blow. It echoes a painful history of broken promises and marginalization. For tribal members, the crisis is entwined with sovereignty and survival. The environmental consequences are equally troubling. As water levels draw down, Lake Mead exposes relics of the past: sunken boats, old dock posts, even the original canyon floor submerged before the dam was built. In 2022, human remains believed to be slain victims from decades ago surfaced in the shrinking lakebed. The drying lakebed reveals a drowned world coming back to light, a somber reflection of what's lost beneath the water. Nearby, Lake Powell on the Colorado River's upper basin follows the same downward slide. In 2022, its drop was so severe the Bureau of Reclamation had to release water from reservoirs hundreds of miles upstream in Wyoming, a desperate move to keep Glen Canyon Dam's turbines operating. The two largest reservoirs in the country now resemble sinking ships, with water moving back and forth, but nowhere near full. The impacts trickle beyond local water and power concerns. Southern California's Imperial Valley, almost entirely dependent on Colorado River water, produces roughly two-thirds of America's winter vegetables. Lettuce, broccoli, and carrots from this desert farmland end up in grocery stores across the nation. Cuts in irrigation water here don't just mean farm losses. They drive food price increases and scarcity that ripple across the country, turning a regional water issue into a national vulnerability. From the heart of the crisis in communities and ecosystems, we begin to glimpse the enormous political and legal battles looming on the horizon. The urgent future negotiations. The current rules governing how Colorado River water is divided are set to expire in 2026, plunging the region into one of its most critical and complex negotiations yet. These rules, established to manage shortages, must be renegotiated by the 7 U.S. states, relying on the river and the federal government. The stakes couldn't be higher. Water shortages threaten cities, farms, ecosystems, and millions of people. These negotiations will define who must take cuts and how deeply. But reaching agreement has proven notoriously difficult. The states are divided along familiar regional and political lines, making compromise challenging. The upper basin states, Colorado, Wyoming, Utah, and New Mexico, argue that they have not fully utilized their legal shares of the river. They contend it would be unfair to make them sacrifice water when lower basin states, especially California, have historically used more than their allotment. With decades of stored water dwindling, upper basin leaders feel pressure to protect their future rights. On the other side, the lower basin states, California, Arizona, and Nevada, hold vast populations, agriculture, and political clout. California alone consumes more Colorado River water than any other state in the nation. Arizona has already experienced significant cuts in recent years, while Nevada has invested billions in water conservation and recycling efforts. These states argue their larger populations and economies demand water security, and that all users must share the pain proportionally. The basic truth about the river exists beyond the power of any involved parties to modify because the river delivers less water today than it did in the 1920s. The Colorado River delivers between 12 million and 13 million acre-feet of water annually, while U.S. legal agreements provide 16.5 million acre-feet of water rights that do not include Mexico's portion. The parched deserts will not receive additional water through any combination of negotiations or legal water rights amendments. The deal has built-in limits which restrict all potential outcomes. The negotiations become more difficult because of the 1944 treaty with Mexico, which establishes a yearly delivery of 1.5 million acre-feet to Mexico. The 7 U.S. states must battle for diminishing resources because treaty obligations require them to honor Mexico's allocated water share. The treaty adds another voice and layer of diplomacy, forcing a binational approach in what has often felt like a domestic problem. The United States must address Mexico's needs and rights because this requires additional effort to reach a final agreement. The Colorado River, which has not reached its historic delta during the past 25 years, serves as an ecological benchmark that shows the ongoing water shortage emergency. The delta has transformed from its former role as a vital wetland area for 2 million acres into a dry mud and salt flat, which now creates obstacles for both wildlife and indigenous people who depend on the river. The environmental loss in the river area causes stakeholders to face dual challenges because they need to protect human life and safeguard the remaining natural resources of the river. The crisis at Hoover Dam and Lake Mead is a wake-up call about water, power, and survival in the American West. A century-old miscalculation, combined with a historic drought, has pushed the system to its limits. The choices ahead are difficult, but unavoidable. If you found this story insightful, please like and subscribe for more deep dives into pressing earth science and environmental issues.